I'm 84 years old, and I have been a widow for just over 3 years now. The house is quiet in a way I never noticed before. Not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of quiet that presses gently against your ears until you realize it has been there all day. I used to think loneliness meant being by yourself. Now I know you can feel it sitting right beside someone you've shared a bed with for half a century. It has taken me this long to understand why my marriage felt so lonely. I am not telling you this because I want sympathy. At my age, sympathy doesn't change much. Most of what could have been changed is already behind me. I'm telling you because when you get to the end of your life, the truth stops feeling dangerous. There's no point hiding from it anymore. And the truth is, nothing was obviously wrong with my marriage. That is what made it so easy to live inside it for so many years. From the outside, we looked like a steady couple. No shouting matches, no broken dishes, no dramatic exits. Just two responsible people building what everyone around us called a good life. I met Thomas when I was 22 years old. He wasn't charming in the way some men are. He didn't tell big stories or try to make me laugh. But he was dependable. Even back then you could feel it. He was the kind of man who showed up on time and paid his bills before they were due. After a childhood that had been more uncertain than I like to admit, dependability felt very close to love. We married 11 months after we met. It seemed like the sensible thing to do. Sensible was a word that followed me through most of my life. Our first apartment was small enough that if I stood in the kitchen, I could hear the kettle whistle and the neighbor's radio through the wall at the same time. We had 2 mismatched chairs and a table Thomas found at a yard sale. One of its legs was shorter than the others, so he folded cardboard underneath it until it stopped wobbling. I remember thinking, this is what building a life looks like. Those early years were busy. Thomas worked long hours at an insurance office. I found a job at a local elementary school, helping in the front office, answering phones, sorting paperwork, putting band-aids on scraped knees. We didn't talk much about feelings. Back then, nobody really did. Love was measured differently, by paychecks, by groceries in the refrigerator, by the car starting every morning. When our first son was born, Thomas stood beside my hospital bed holding a bouquet that looked too large for his hands. He leaned down, kissed my forehead and said, "I'll take good care of you both." And he did. That was never the problem. Years moved the way they tend to when you are young, quickly but without you noticing. There were mortgages to consider, school districts to think about, dentist appointments, oil changes, church on Sundays when we could manage it. Our dinner conversations were practical. "Did you pay the electric bill?" Your mother called. "The car is making a strange noise." We functioned beautifully, like 2 gears turning in the same machine. But gears don't look at each other. I didn't notice the distance then. Or maybe I did, in small, quiet moments that I brushed aside. Once, not long after our daughter was born, I suggested we go away for a weekend. Just the 2 of us. Thomas looked surprised. "What for?" he asked. I laughed and said, "To be together." He nodded slowly, as if trying to understand a language he hadn't learned. "We're together every day," he said. We never took that trip. It seemed unnecessary after that conversation. I told myself I was being childish. Marriage wasn't about excitement. It was about stability. At least that is what I believed. Thomas was not unkind. Let me say that clearly. He never forgot my birthday. He fixed things before I even noticed they were broken. When I caught the flu one winter, he made soup and left it warming on the stove before he left for work. But tenderness is quieter than care, and sometimes harder to recognize when it's missing. I remember one evening when the children were still small. The power went out during a storm, and the house was lit only by candles. The kids thought it was an adventure. We sat in the living room listening to the wind push against the windows. I looked at Thomas and felt a sudden urge to tell him something. I don't even remember what now. Something about being afraid of how fast life was going. Something about wanting to hold on to this moment. But he was reviewing paperwork by candlelight. I watched the shadows move across his face and said nothing. That became a pattern I did not see forming. There were many things I almost said. Almost. When the children became teenagers, our house filled with noise again. Slammed doors, laughter, the hum of televisions left on too late. Thomas worked even more by then. Promotions came with responsibility, and responsibility came with longer hours. I admired him for it. I truly did. When neighbours spoke about their husbands spending afternoons at the bar or forgetting anniversaries, I would smile quietly to myself. My husband was reliable, solid, good. It never occurred to me to ask whether goodness and closeness were the same thing. Looking back now, I can see how loneliness does not always arrive like a stranger. Sometimes it grows slowly, right inside a shared life. There were nights Thomas would fall asleep within minutes, his breathing deep and steady beside me. I would lie awake listening to it. Not irritated, not even sad, just aware. Aware that there were thoughts inside me he would never hear. Years later, when the children moved out one by one, the house seemed to exhale. Their absence revealed something I had been too busy to notice. Thomas and I did not know how to be alone together. We tried in our way. We ate dinner across from each other at the same wooden table we'd owned for decades. We watched the evening news, sometimes a game show. Conversation became thinner. "How was your day?" "Fine." "Did you see the mail?" "On the counter." It wasn't cold, just narrow. Once, after our daughter's wedding, I found myself crying quietly while folding napkins in the kitchen. Thomas came in, startled. "Are you all right?" I nodded. "Just emotional," I said. What I didn't say was this. Watching our children build lives full of laughter made me realize how little laughter had lived inside our own marriage. Not none, just less than I suddenly wished there had been. Still, I told myself this was normal. Long marriages settle. They become less like songs and more like furniture. Dependable, familiar, easy to overlook. On our 40th anniversary, Thomas gave me a gold bracelet. It was beautiful, heavy in my palm. I thanked him, kissed his cheek, and we went out to dinner. I remember sitting across from him in the restaurant, candlelight between us again after all those years. A younger couple sat nearby, leaning close together, their heads almost touching as they talked. I watched them longer than I meant to. Thomas noticed. "What are you looking at?" "Oh, nothing," I said. But it wasn't nothing. It was recognition, arriving late and without warning. By the time I turned 70, our routines were carved into us. Morning coffee, separate sections of the newspaper, quiet afternoons. He gardened, I read. There is comfort in predictability, but there is also a kind of disappearing that happens inside it. You stop expecting to be surprised. Then one autumn morning, Thomas collapsed while trimming the hedges. The sound of the shears hitting the ground is something I still hear sometimes when the house is very still. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and overbrewed coffee. Machines hummed. Doctors spoke in careful voices. Stroke, severe. The word severe has a way of hollowing out everything around it. For weeks I sat beside his bed. I watched his chest rise and fall. I spoke to him, though he rarely responded. And in that quiet room, something inside me began to panic, not only because I might lose him, but because I realized how much we had never said. I tried then. I held his hand and told him about the day we met, about how nervous I'd been walking down the aisle, about the nights I lay awake listening to him breathe. "I wish we had talked more," I whispered once. His eyelids fluttered, but I don't know if he heard me. When someone is slipping away, you discover how badly you want one more ordinary conversation. He died on a grey morning in February. No dramatic final words, just a long breath, and then none. After the funeral, people filled the house with casseroles and soft voices. They called our marriage an example. 58 years, one woman said, squeezing my hand. What a blessing. I nodded, because it was a blessing, but blessings can still contain absences. The first night alone, I reached across the bed without thinking. My hand met cold sheets. That is when the weight of it settled over me, not just grief, but the understanding that the closeness I had quietly longed for was now impossible. Not difficult, impossible. You cannot build intimacy with someone who is gone. In the months that followed, I sorted through drawers and boxes. Our life reduced itself to objects, ticket stubs, warranty papers, old photographs curled at the edges. I found a birthday card he'd given me decades earlier. Inside, in his careful handwriting, it said, "To the center of my life." I sat on the floor holding that card for a very long time. Thomas loved me. I have no doubt about that. But love, unspoken, unexplored, left to operate on assumption, can become strangely quiet, and quiet love can feel, at times, like loneliness. The realization did not come all at once. It arrived in pieces, like light slowly entering a room. I began remembering all the moments I chose not to reach toward him, and all the moments he probably didn't know how to reach toward me, even after decades. If I could sit across from Thomas now, I would not accuse him of anything. I would simply say, I wish we had been braver with each other, braver about our fears, braver about our tenderness, braver about saying, stay with me a minute, I want you to know what's inside my heart. But life, when you are living it forward, rarely announces what you will one day regret. By the time I understood this, truly understood it, I was already an old woman sitting alone at the kitchen table. So if you are listening to me now, I want to speak gently for a moment, not to tell you what you should do, only to offer what I learned too late. Do not assume that sharing a house means you are sharing a life. Sit together sometimes without distraction. Ask the extra question. Say the affectionate thing even if it feels unnecessary. Let the people you love know not just that you will take care of them, but that you see them. And let yourself be seen too. It is a vulnerable thing, being known, but the alternative is lonelier than most people realize. Understanding, however, does not travel backward. It only sits with you in the time you have left. I don't know how many years remain for me. At 84, you stop measuring life in decades. You begin measuring it in seasons, maybe even in holidays. And strangely, alongside the sorrow, there is gratitude. We built a stable life, raised good children, weathered hardships without turning against each other. There is dignity in that. I just wish we had allowed more warmth inside the structure we worked so hard to build. I think I will sit with it a while. The house is still quiet, but now at least I understand why. And understanding, even when it arrives late, has its own kind of peace.